call the meeting to order. We have a few members that are going from Ways and Means and others. Appreciate you all being here. I asked the legislators that had a capital project if they would come here, and I'm going to ask you all to stand up or come forward and just real briefly say which project you have and where you're from, and whether it be technical and adult or university system. This is primarily about the university system capital projects. That way you can talk and be seen and plead your case. So let's just stand where you are and say who you are and what your capital project is and request. Representative Scott, was this a line in the priority? Was it skipped over? Okay. Okay. Next. Was it on the priority list? And it's on the list, on the bond list this time. Secretary Chokers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tommy, did you say y'all are shovel ready? Got you.
Next. Nice smile you got on your face. Thank you, sir. You can take that and we'll get a copy to the members. Yes, sir. Representative Glanton did a great job in Shining Stars, and for those in the audience here, we started Shining Stars last year to put on a pedestal those people that truly do bring something great to Georgia, and today we had one of those as well. Thank you for the job you did, sir. Thank you, sir. Next. Anybody else from the legislature? How about members of the committee here that want to talk about a project that's in their area for libraries or university system? Okay. We've got something today that I thought would be beneficial to all of us. I spent a good bit of time with, I can't recall whether you're called a commissioner, is that correct? Okay. Representative Steve Stansel was here when I was, and we're trying to bypass that funny note, keep your daytime job. But anyways, Representative Steve Stansel has always been someone that has watched after the taxpayers' dollars, and his position now as a chairman or commissioner of the building authorities. He's also part of the GSFIC, which is a bonding section of as the projects go forward. And I'd like to, what I'd asked him to do is to come in and tell us how this process goes. And it's very exciting and very intriguing what he has to say. That if you'd come forward, I'm going to go through the process leading up to you and the building authority and GSFIC. And this won't take but about 5 or 10 minutes, but I think it's very good for the members and maybe many in the audience here to understand how a project gets to the actual key in the door. And I'd like to start from our end. Like I mentioned to you the other day, I'm going to go through real quickly how it gets to you. Say someone in a community has a library that they, well, let's talk about a university campus capital project. They will come up with the concept, and Mr. Tom Daniel and the Regents, if y'all help me if I'm not, no, but I'm just getting it up to you. Is if you have a project, say University of Georgia has a project, then someone on the campus goes to the President Adams and he says, I like it, I'm going to recommend it to the Board of Regents. The Board of Regents likes it. And in August, they'll approve by vote of the capital projects that they want to put on the priority list. And then they go to the governor's office during that time from August until the time that we actually see the budget book on Wednesday of the first day of the session after his State of the State. And it's in recommendations. And then we on this subcommittee are assigned the wishes of the regents and others, and we go through this. We recommend it to the full House Appropriations, and the appropriation passed. It goes to the Senate. The Senate keeps it in, and after the conference committee meets, that's just 3 from the House, 3 from the Senate, that come together to put the whole budget together. There's a project stays in that budget. Now, the point we are now is the governor signs this budget. Now we're at the point where we now go to Representative Stansel. And I think that's a pretty good history or chronology of how an idea becomes law, and then you carry forward that project. Thank you for being here, my good friend.
Having us here, and it's good to see some of my old friends on the committees. Guys, I hope you're doing well. The first thing we're going to do is pass you out a little handout there, PowerPoint that you can take with you and kind of follow along with what we're doing. And the second thing I'm going to do is I'm going to ask Marvin Woodward if he would. We have come up with a new property or estate construction manual, and we did this working with Linda Daniels and the folks over at the Board of Regents, private sector, and all. And we have brought each of you a copy of the new construction manual. You're going to get a disc, and Mr. Chairman, we're going to give you the book, but I'm cheap, and those books cost about $150, so we're only going to give y'all one. We'll give y'all the CD version. The Georgia, our Finance Commission was created by a constitutional amendment back in 1972, and we're found in Georgia Code 50-17-20. And we are responsible. There's 2 divisions. There's the Finance Division and there's the Construction Division. So the Finance Division, and we'll talk about this in just a minute, they're the ones that issue the bonds, and we're the ones that after the bonds are issued make sure they're spent like you have asked and you and the governor have intended that they be spent. Our board is made up of 5 elected officials: the governor, the lieutenant governor, the speaker of the House, the attorney general, the commissioner of agriculture, and also 2 appointed state officers, the director of the Treasury and the state auditor. So we've got seven members on our board. As I said a while ago, there's two divisions. There's the Finance and Investment Division, and Susan Ridley is the director there. And Susan's going to come up in just a minute and talk to you about what she does. But she sells the bonds, and she has just completed yesterday the selling of some bonds, as you probably know, and she did an outstanding job. And y'all need to give her a round of applause when she gets through in a minute, because she's done an outstanding job. But she does the planning, scheduling, selling, and delivery of the general obligation bonds for the state of Georgia. She does the investment, the accounting of the bond sale proceeds to make sure the money's spent, as I said a while ago, like you had intended for it to, and staff support for Higher Education Facilities Authority, or JAHIFA they call that. And then this construction division, I'm the director of that, and then I have a deputy director for the State Property Commission, who is Marvin Woodward, and we oversee both GBA, State Property Commission, and the construction division of GISTIC. So we wear 3 hats around here. And under him is DC Modeling, and DC is the deputy that takes care of the day-to-day work of the construction division. You're going to be hearing from DC in just a few minutes also. Our approach to our business, we want to make sure that we got a world-class organization, that we utilize the construction industry's best managed practices, and that we strive for and maintain professional excellence. We want to make sure we have good stewardship of your tax dollars, and that's what our goals are. The chairman asked, as he said, for us to come up with a flow chart of how we do each process. As he said, an agency comes up with an idea. They go through their master plan. Most places have a 5-year strategic plan or a master plan. It comes through that process, works up. They do a feasibility study. The second part is the legislative part. The chairman went through that very eloquently, and y'all know that as well as anybody. So back to the strategic planning part of it. An agency sometimes will, from their operating funds, do a feasibility study necessary to obtain the legislative approval. So nobody is able to just come in and tell OPB or tell y'all this is what I want without having it in a plan and justify it. That's one thing I think Governor Dee's done a great job of, is making sure everybody comes up and justifies their request. They come up with their early design work, the scope, the preliminary schedule, the order of the magnitude of the budget, sort of get a ballpark figure of what it's going to cost to do it. Then they do their prioritized, their 5-year capital program, and all this is submitted to OPB. And then the first year, they hope that it makes the governor's budget request. The second part is the funding part, and I'm going to ask Susan to come up and go through the funding. This, to me, has been one of the most fascinating things that I've been involved in, is watching Susan sell these bonds. I've never done any bond work. And Susan?
Thank you, Steve.
Tell them what you do.
Thank you, Steve. We had an extremely successful sale this week. It had a lot more to do with luck than anything to do with me. But we did have a successful sale of nearly $614 million in general obligation bonds that the commission approved yesterday. But that's not why you asked me here. You asked me, you want to hear about this process. So where Steve left off is basically the point at which you all review and approve projects for authorization. Once they make it into the appropriations bill, then the agencies, of course, are notified, and the agencies are keeping track of what you all are doing. They know what projects have been authorized for GO bonds. Their boards, for the agencies that have boards, pass resolutions saying that the project is ready to go, that they accept all of the rules and regulations that apply to the bonds. The bonds are tax exempt, so they're subject to certain rules. Those boards have to resolve to comply by those rules. They submit those resolutions to us, and they request that the bonds be sold. The bonds are not sold on a regular schedule. They're sold when we have agency requests, when projects are ready, and when market conditions are favorable. As you all know, last fall was not a particularly favorable time to sell bonds. We were fortunate in that we had a bond sale in June. We had sold a little over $500 million in June. So we had agency requests that came in the fall, but given market conditions, we decided to wait until the first of the year until things improved. It was a good thing we did. Probably saved the state. It's hard to quantify what rates we would have gotten in the fall, but they would have been much higher than what we got this week. So we were able to sell the full amount of what the agencies had requested. There is a little give and take. Sometimes we get more requests than what we're actually able to sell, but the agencies have always been very good about prioritizing which of their projects are the most critical. At this point, we have $478 million of authorized but unsold bonds. So we will be receiving agency requests for timing of the next sale. And as you all approve the FY10 bonds, we'll go through that process again. Once the bonds are sold, proceeds are received, then it goes back to Steve to manage the commitment process and to manage the construction process. So unless you got any questions for me, I'm going to turn it back over to him.
Thank you. We have one question. My good friend Chairman Hembry.
Absolutely. The projects that were included, absolutely. Okay. The projects are included in our offering statement, which is publicly posted. It's on our website, but we'll be glad to submit the committee information. Sure. For higher education projects.
We've already talked about that. We have our media person. I've already talked to him over to start following all of them.
I need to ask you a couple of questions about the 09 bonds. You're saying there's 478 unsold. I think we got a pretty good idea of what happened in October. How important was AIG relating to this debacle?
Well,
AIG, tell them what AIG is. So that
American Insurance Group, it's the big insurance firm. They are a large holder of municipal bonds, not just Georgia's bonds, but a lot of other issuers' bonds. They did not have a direct impact on us, but it was really more the Lehman Brothers bankruptcy that prevented a lot of municipal issuers from going to market. When the secondary market for trading of municipal bonds collapsed after the Lehman Brothers bankruptcy, a lot of issuers pulled back from the market. You also had, and this may be what you're thinking about, the insurance on municipal bonds, which AIG is not one of those, but there are many insurers of municipal bonds, not for AAA states like Georgia, but a lot of your local governments carry municipal bond insurance because their credit rating is low. That enables them to get a better credit rating and a lower interest rate. When those insurance companies were no longer in business or were downgraded, a lot of local governments, some states, did not have any market access because of the lack of liquidity and lack of insurance.
let's talk about the 478 million that's left.
Okay.
What do you think the possibilities of moving them the next time? Is this going to happen? Is the market? I mean, you can't foresee the market then, but because of the AAA bond rating, are we able to sell these bonds in the market?
We are certainly hopeful that we will be able to do that before the fiscal year ends. The Commission yesterday did authorize us to proceed towards the next sale. We do have to keep in mind how much Georgia paper comes on the market at any particular time. There is a Garvey bond issuance scheduled to price in the next 2 weeks. So we'll want to wait and see. We will have saturated the market pretty well with the GO sale of just over $600 million, then a Garvey sale of $600 million. We'll want to wait and see how the market absorbs that and determine whether April, May, or maybe sometime later would be the right time to sell the remaining 09 bonds.
To the members of the committee, I personally think this is extremely important to this committee to bring this forward. How we go from the inception to the putting the key in the door, but especially this conversation we're having now, in light of the economic climate, jobs are being lost. Here's 478 million that could be pumped into the construction market, and I think this is one way that we've already approved it through the legislative process. We need to get it done. What can we do as a legislative body to effectuate that?
Well, I think the Commission went a long way yesterday in pre-authorizing us to proceed with the process for getting ready for the next sale. We will be contacting those agencies that have outstanding bonds so that they can get their resolutions done. Their boards need to meet. They need to get their resolutions to us to be included in this next sale.
A little follow-up question. As you know, many universities and technical colleges have a foundation, and they even set up an authority of sort to sell revenue bonds. we don't really have a good handle on where those revenue bonds are statewide. There's several $1 billion, I'm sure. At what point are those, a couple of questions here, at what point are those considered full faith and credit of the state of Georgia? And how do we, if you said a while ago that we have saturated the market. If you're competing with the revenue bonds and you've got Garvey bonds and you have these 478 million, how many did you sell yesterday?
613,850.
And you have all this saturation in the market. Are the revenue bonds saturating it even further?
Well, I'm going to let Linda or someone from
We'll get
Regents
that. We'll get that later.
address the public-private ventures. You do have the state approved, the legislation you all approved in 2006 for the Higher Education Facilities Authority. They hopefully will have a second issue of bonds this summer sometime. There is a cap on that, on revenue bonds issued by that authority of $300 million. They've issued $100 million to date. And we are looking at hopefully another $100 million this year for facilities primarily at the Board of Regents.
Now, remember, we had a budget meeting back in September, I believe, when Chairman Harbin called us in and he said that we were going to stall some of these bond sales because it would save us in the budget a certain amount of money and all. Could you elaborate on that procedure? And now we're even moving further with $478 million. How much is this helping our budget bottom line?
I believe what the chairman may have been referring to is when we issue general obligation bonds, we make payments on those bonds of interest and principal twice a year, in January and in July. When we sell the bonds midway through a fiscal year, we will only have one payment. That first payment is an interest-only payment. Am I saying that right, Lee? Okay. So I believe what Chairman Harbin was referring to is with a delay of the bonds until after the first of the year, there wouldn't be an initial payment until the following fiscal year. That is the case with these bonds. We'll make our first payment on the bond sale that we just had in July. And it's really an incremental savings in the amended 09 budget because we will have to make full interest and principal payments in the FY10 year.
Commissioner and I were talking, and it was relating to interest rates on the existing bonds that we have, and that you take very close attention or pay very close attention to the existing bonds, and if the interest rates are too high, then perhaps
refinance.
Do you go to the bond holders and say, we're going to sell them, or we're going to offer you a chance to take a lower rate, or how do you do that?
We have in the past done refinancings at this, and we are constantly doing a market analysis to see if there are cost savings available to the state from refinancing. Given where the markets have been, there has not been that opportunity. Georgia is a AAA state, has been for 15 years. And we have received the lowest interest rates available to any issuer because of that AAA rating. So there have been a few opportunities in the past to do refinancings, and we have done those. When was the last one, Lee? 2006. But at this time, there's not a substantial cost savings to refinancing at this point.
Chairman Hembry. Could you pause while we do what we did with the other members? If the members could come forward, I want to get you in and out of here. I know you got other committees, but what we asked you to do, just stand right there. That's fine. And, but what I want you to say, if collectively, if you're in the same delegation, tell us what you have, what capital projects that you have. We'll get that picture. What capital projects that you do have, and why you're here, where you're from, and just a brief analysis for the members of the committee. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for mentioning that. And you are my friend. My friend. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Next up. Thank you. Next up. Thank you, sir. Is that a new dance? New dance step. There you go. Thank you for being here, my friend. Anybody else? Anybody in the legislature? Thank you, Chairman Henry, for bringing that up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to recognize a guest that I have from home. Blake Sullivan is here. He's sitting in on this committee. Thank you, Blake. I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir. All right. Now, any other members have a question here? Chairman Henry.
Can you tell me how far back, there's some bonds, you talked about the timing, the agencies need to let you know. Are there bonds that have not been issued, that have been sold, that have been there for over a year or 2 years? Is there some kind of time limitation?
That's a good question. There is not a specific time limitation, although we make sure to tell the agencies and this is for arbitrage reasons, to make sure that the projects are ready to go, because we can't sell the bonds and then just sit on the cash and earn interest off of it. The IRS has rules against that. So we have to make sure the agencies are ready to go, and that's part of what Steve was talking about with the planning process and the feasibility studies. We need to make sure that projects are shovel ready, as you all have been saying. So there are some cases where agencies are not as ready maybe as they should have been once the bonds were sold. I do, in this, of the 478 that's authorized but unissued, I don't believe that any of those are either, any of the ones that are older than 09 are from either the technical college system or Board of Regents. Is that correctly? There are some bonds that are older, amended 08, and there are a couple in there that are a few years older than that, but most of them are 09 authorizations. I believe so. There are a few. Yes. That's a good question. That would be something to ask the agencies. Right. Right. Okay. Well, we can get you a list of all of the projects that were authorized yesterday that are included in that 478. That includes everything that's authorized but unsold, which is mostly 09, but there are some prior year projects on that list.
Would you get that to us so we can distribute it? And even along the years, every quarter or however you do it, it'd be great for the committee. I want to follow up with what the chairman said is if you haven't sold a bond in 07, which is really 6 and 7, 2-3 years ago, and you sell it, how long is an architecture seal valid? And then how long is a bid process valid? And on and on and on we go with this.
Well, I'm going to have to defer that to my next speaker if you want me to bring him up now.
Not yet. Let's finish with her.
Okay.
I really, Mr. Commissioner, I appreciate this is very intriguing. I think the members are agreeing that this is something that we should be doing. So for you that are waiting for the next round, if we could give us another, how much longer? Another 5 minutes, 10 minutes to do it? Depends on the questions. Okay. But as you can tell, we got a little interest in this, and this is very, very important because you're protecting that AAA bond rating. We've got people that need to put the jobs. We need to get some construction projects going. And if there's some that are still lingering around since 07 and 06 and 08 and then even 09, that we need to get moving. And what do we need to do as a legislative body to move it? This This is our stimulus package,
Yes,
if you want to call it that. Something that's already approved, signed into law. Sorry. But any other, Secretary Choke, let's try to keep moving. I keep
Thank you,
asking
Mr.
questions. How do we keep moving?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is it because of the locals haven't completed what they're supposed to do, the resolution, or has all that been completed, and that's why those packages? There's a little bit of a disconnect as to why. I don't quite understand.
I think it's going to vary a great deal by agencies. I think you may be referring to some of the K-12 bonds, and those may have to do with a local school system either not being ready or having some other sort of matching issue and not having their matching funds. So that there could be a variety of reasons for why an agency is not ready to receive the bond proceeds.
It's not on the part of your department. Is that what you're telling me?
When the agencies are ready, we'll include them in the list. Now, sometimes we do have to go back to them and say, we have a list of 750 or 800 million. That's more than we think we can sell. We go back to the agencies and say, please prioritize and include on your request only what is critical and is truly ready to go at this point. So, and like I said, the agencies have been historically very cooperative in adjusting their requests to make sure we can get to a manageable level.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you. Commissioner, I've got a new university president. Need to get back to his office. If I could get him up here for just a brief comment. Dr. Becker, would you come forward? The newest president in the university system, Dr. Becker from Georgia State University. We were going to try to give all the research universities some time in front of the committee, and he can't be with us Tuesday. And we appreciate you being here. Some brief comments about who you are, where you're going, and what you're going to do to make Georgia a better state.
Briefly, huh? Mark Becker, President of Georgia State University. Where I'm going is nowhere. I'm right here. Where Georgia State University is going is hopefully to the top. Georgia State University, as you know, is one of the 4 research universities in the state, and we are the urban research university for the state of Georgia. And our goal, our vision really is to be one of the premier urban research universities in America. And in so doing, help the state of Georgia get to the top. You know, we are located here in Atlanta, but we can leverage that asset for the entire state. So.
President, you got some big shoes to fill with the leaving of Dr. Carl Patton. Dr. Patton he's a giant in Atlanta and in Georgia higher education, and he really has some big shoes to fill. Another comment I want to make is Speaker Pro Tem Mark Burkhalter's son, Sam, was just signed yesterday to play on the first ever Georgia State football team starting in fall of 2010. So you may have a little ally in the Speaker Pro Tem's office.
I hope Sam gets a lot of playing time, and of course we expect him to play well when he gets that playing time as well. I understand he's quite fast.
Any questions to the president? I think you've been on the hot seat long enough this time. Thank you very much and for being here, sir. Best of luck to you in Georgia State, especially for Georgia.
Look forward to being back to get into more detail later. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner, I appreciate you letting us interrupt you there.
Mr. Chairman, it's your meeting. We'll do whatever you like. Next, I want to bring up D.C. Modeling. D.C. is the deputy that oversees the day-to-day construction phase, and he's going to take the design phase all the way to completion. That noise you hear coming across here, I finally found somebody that was tighter with the dollar than I am. So that was D.C. squeaking as he came across here.
Mr. Speaker, members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity. I'm sensitive to your time concerns here, so I'm going to just hit the highlights real quickly, and if I miss something, we'll pick it up with your questions. When we built this chart laying out this process, we didn't really intend to put a time schedule on the bottom, but in reality, where we're at now, which is in the middle of this chart, is probably about the middle of the life of this project. Going through that programming and the funding and getting the money lined up could easily be 18 months or longer, and that's about how much time we have left, 18 to 2.5 years left between now and the time the project is delivered. So it wasn't intended that way, but it is a little bit of a timeline in addition to process. Throughout this early part of the timeline, the agencies have been providing the energy to get this thing through. They've identified the need, developed the need, publicized the need, gotten all the support they could muster, and got it through to you folks, and gotten the money set aside for the project. That continues through the design phase, but at the design phase, at this point, GSFIC starts to offer assistance. Some degrees or some projects more than others, but we're there. We assign a project manager, and we start coming alongside the agency to help get the project delivered. At the beginning of this process, the design process, is a very key decision that gets made about what will the construction contract look like when we decide to build this. And we have basically two options, two alternatives. One is a traditional delivery method, which in your packet is called the design bid build process. The other method is what folks most of the time talk about when they're saying a fast track method, and that is either a CM at risk or a design build method. One of those delivery methods is chosen. You talk about it back in the programming stage, but when you hire your architect, you have to know. You make the decision then. In fact, the architectural contract is different depending on the delivery method that you use. But that really sets the stage and describes the architect's activity. So it's a very important decision. It also is an important decision with regard to funding. In a design bid build delivery method, you could have appropriation set aside 1 year for design and then the following year for construction, because what happens in that process is you have a deliberate break in the middle where you go through design, you get the design done, you can stop at that point and then wait for the money to show up, then advertise and build it. If you use a fast track method, a CM delivery method, or a design build delivery method, that funding plan doesn't work too well, because you bring the contractor on very early in the process, almost immediately after you've hired the architect. So the design and the construction phases are overlapping much more than in a design bid build phase. So that's the design phase. We are there. We're in some instances we're very involved. We're always tracking. You have budget and schedule implications that are dealt with during the design phase, and we want to help agencies get through that. But the agencies are leading and in the forefront of that process. When you move into the construction phase and you're dealing with a construction contract and the contractors, we still have a very tight relationship, but GSFIC is a little bit more toward the front of the operation. We think that we need to be pulling all that stuff together, and we want to work closely with the agency, but all of the contract administration is going with GSFIC leading through that operation. We get toward the end of the construction phase. We're starting to talk with the agency about taking over the facility. We're talking with them about making sure that their staff, the facility staff, is trained to operate the facility. We start making sure that they're getting all the operating manuals, the warranties that are required. We start looking at picking up insurance responsibilities for the facility. All of that stuff happens right at the end of the construction phase, an activity that we call material completion. Move from the construction phase into the operation phase. The agencies have access. We've given the keys to the facility. They control who comes and goes, but you still have the contractor involved to a slight degree. He's got some time to work off what we call minor incomplete work, more commonly called the punch list. The contractor is still there working, but the facility belongs to the agency. They've started to move in. They've got equipment and furniture and all the stuff that goes with moving into a facility. All that's happening after the construction in the occupancy stage, but our contractor's still there working off the punch list. He'll get that punch list worked off, and then we have a warranty period in all of our contracts for a year. The contractor stands behind his work for that year. We have a warranty program, an email, online notification if the using agency has a problem with doors not operating properly, or elevators, or windows, or anything they don't think it's working properly. They send it to us. We get the contractor back in, and for the first year, all that warranty work is covered under the general contractor's warranty. We also get a 5-year roof and wall bond, and the manufacturers on many of the equipment items that go into the facility have a separate manufacturer's warranty. It may be a 2-year warranty on a chiller or a piece of equipment. So those warranties, we help the agencies follow up when they've got a problem, they have something they want done. That basically covers the design, construction, and occupancy phases.
Thank you. I've got a few questions. Maybe the lights will come on. This is very important. Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. One question before you start. The $478 million, maybe somebody could answer this. How many of, what percentage of those are higher ed projects? And you could answer that later, but I just want you to be thinking about that. You could give me a percentage later. Okay. The other thing is, what is your background? You in the private sector business?
Actually, I was Corps of Engineers for 26 years prior to retiring. And when I retired, I was Public Works Director for Fulton County, and then a short time down in South Florida also as a Public Works Director. So I've been in public sector work.
Thank you. Mr. Commissioner, do you have anybody on staff that had been in the private sector that understands this process?
Marvin Woodward, my deputy property officer, is in the private sector. He's been with the town.
So he understands all the nuances of this thing. So you well.
Our other staff members, we recruit those folks from the private sector.
So you've got a well-rounded staff of both private sector and quasi-public sectors like yourself. Then that's encouraging. The watching in the contracting business, banks have draw accounts, and the holdbacks are 10% or 8% or 6% or whatever you negotiate in the beginning. Do you have that in your process?
Yes, sir.
And
We construction contracts, we withhold 10% retainage up through the midpoint of the project in terms of the funding, halfway through the spending of the money. And then if the contractor requests that we reduce those, and if he is on schedule and we don't have outstanding issues with him, then we will stop retainage at that point and freeze it at what amounts to 5% of the total cost.
Okay. A little follow-up to that is, and I'm not going to mention the institution because they've been beat up on this a few times, and rightly so, but it wasn't partly their fault and partly not. It's an institution that had a type of laboratory that was a level 1, and this has been going on for 10, 12 years, where somebody didn't hire the right architect, number 1. Number 2, it didn't get built properly. A lot of problems with it, and it's still got problems even today after the specialty architect was brought in. What are we doing to address that, number 1? Number 2, you're saying that there's a oversight of this, and if somebody fails, somebody comes in, steps in, and pays it off. What happens if AIG is one of the bondholders, one of the ones that are paying the performance bonds? What happens with AIG fails and there's nobody to pay the performance bond? I know there's a lot of convoluted things there, but it's very important that specialty architects, what happens if it fails? What happens if the bond performance bond holder fails?
A couple of one of the safety measures that we are now employing in our construction contracts, and in particular in the very complicated facilities that we're building, we hire an independent third agent called a commissioning agent. And that agent or that firm is charged with doing an independent assessment to ensure that the systems in that facility are operating the way they were intended to operate. So in a say a research lab that was fairly complicated, you would have a commissioning agent who would come in and inspect things like the waste disposal systems and the overpressure systems, and they would conduct a number of tests to ensure that that facility is operating the way it was designed before we get to the end of the project. Before we want to find out if it's not working right before everybody's gone home. So that guy comes in. There's actually the process now brings them in even earlier than we don't just bring them in at the end. We try to get them involved early. They review plans and make comments regarding how difficult it will be to either operate that system or build it in the first place. So the commissioning agent gets input during the process early, and then he's there at the end to ensure that everything is operating the way it was intended to operate and delivering the capability that it was intended.
What happens if AIG fails and they're the performance bonds holder? And have you experienced any of that?
I'm not aware that we've had any instances where a surety, where we've called and asked a surety to fulfill an obligation under a performance bond and the surety was gone. That one of the provisions we have there is our contracts require that the surety have an A- rating or better. So we're looking for very sound sureties. That doesn't. I won't say that it couldn't happen. Our first response is to go to the contractor, and we, in most instances, the contractors are very. I shouldn't have said very. They are cooperative when they realize that there's a problem with something they've done. Sometimes takes us some work to convince them that it's their fault and not a changed condition or normal decay of the system or something. But
what happens if a contractor fails?
Well, when the contractor is not there, and we have had those instances, then we have gone to the surety, but we haven't had a case where both have not been there.
Right, I'm going to go back to the question one more time. Have you or the building authority experienced any loss due to performance bond not being paid?
No, sir.
Not yet.
Not that I'm aware of.
Do you? Not that you're aware of.
No, sir.
Who else do we need to talk with to find out if there's anybody aware of this?
Well, I can get with our financial folks and see if.
Okay. Do you foresee any coming down the pipe anytime soon in this regard?
I think that there can be. I would expect that we could very well have an issue where the contractor is no longer there. I don't think it is as likely that we'll have an issue where the
likely
surety
is a big
not.
word, but are you constantly reviewing these contracts, these performance bonds, to see if they are performing or capable of performing into the future? Because we got tough roads ahead of us, and the last thing we want to see is for the taxpayer dollars to be expended on these projects to have it failed, like one I earlier alluded to, that has now done it twice, and we're still wrestling with that particular lab. So going forward, what mechanism do you have that you could send back to us as legislators that are hopefully the overseer of taxpayer funds, so that we can see something coming? If it's bad, we want to know about it.
Yes, sir.
But we don't need. You said I don't think so, or not that I know of. We need to know.
Yes,
It's
sir.
major stuff.
I will confirm and get back to you that we have not had an instance where a surety has
Thank you.
failed under one of our contracts.
Thank you.
We also, though, the bond rate or the rating, the surety's rating that we require in our contract is based on their viability. Now, and there are folks much smarter than I am about those things that project that surety's viability. If they're rated A-, then the industry has said they're pretty good risk. We can look, and I will look at whether or not our contract, whether or not we are taking undue risk in that area.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you, sir.
Mr. Mr. Chairman, that concludes our 5-minute presentation.
Anybody want to applause? Thank you very much. You have some good folks working. The ones that I met with you the other day are just jam up. Thank you for what you do. Thank you, sir. All right. Thank you, Dr. Becker, for being with us and your patience, and best of luck to you too, sir, and Mr. Harris. We're way behind schedule, but most of you will agree that this was a very, very productive part of what we do. I'd like to. How long does the libraries take to go through their numbers? The libraries. Let's, Mr. Daniel, would you allow the libraries to go first, or how would we like to do this? Now, who's going to present the Regent's capital projects? Okay. Let's, Mr. Beats, let's go and talk about the libraries. We have a few members that have an interest in the library. If we could, you got a PowerPoint of sort? Is it necessary?
Not necessarily.
It doesn't take long to set it up, does it? Does it take long to set it up?
I'll talk through it and share with you what we've got. We certainly had some nice pictures to show you of
if you want to do a PowerPoint, let's do it. You can talk while they're setting it up.
Sure.
Thank you.
What, as you know, the
excuse me, to the members, this is Dr. Lamar Beats, the director of the public libraries in the state of Georgia. And now we have one library in every single county in Georgia after we did Pierce County. Is that correct?
At least one publicly owned building.
Right.
That operates as a library.
And has Pierce County is it under construction or?
It's in the design stage.
Okay.
So
but we're moving on the very last library.
Yes.
This is unbelievable that one county didn't have a publicly owned library, but Pierce County is the last one. Any comments from the members?
Mr. Chairman, they tell me you have the button for the screen.
Okay. All right. You ready?
Yes, sir.
While we're talking,
Yes,
while we're here and waiting on Dr. Veets to set up, Monday the members. I'd like to know if the members that can go to the Cisco facility on Monday from 1. We meet at the Guard Shack at 1:30. Get back here no later than 3:15, 3:30. This is, if you can, we may not be a session. I don't know. We not. You can? Because let me tell you, we're going to have 8 or 10 people max, and if the members don't go, there'll be slots open for others. This is an extraordinary story about communications. Cisco bought a Georgia-based company called Scientific Atlanta that was in the cable box business and so converter business. And when you walk into Cisco's building here in Atlanta, a Georgia company, Georgia-based company, you're taken back by the futuristics out where the communication is just, it's unbelievable. How many of you seen Cisco's lab here in Atlanta? Okay. You about ready?
We haven't gotten the screen down yet, so
Let's start and come back to it, sir.
We're just going to come back and find
That'd be great. I'm going to keep moving.
What you have had handed to you are two documents. One is the quarterly Georgia Public Library Quarterly Journal that is produced by the Georgia Library Association. And I really wanted just to bring this to your attention exactly. That is hot off the press, and it highlights the new library at North Georgia College. There's a several-page article in it on page 15, but there are also several other articles, both long and small, that talk about construction of public libraries and public and college libraries in the state of Georgia. So I thought that this would be apropos to today's conversation. especially when we're talking about both public libraries and Board of Regents University System projects. But these are some that we can point to as tremendous investments of the bond fund money that we have just heard about, and are so appreciative to those staff members in that department for their guidance and support as we try to move these projects along. What you also have in your hand is a multi-page description of each of those projects that really address the 11 projects that are being recommended by the governor in his budget. We have had certainly a number of projects, many projects, and if you could see the slideshow, there's a map of Georgia that has the various counties highlighted that have had construction projects in the 2007 to 2009 time period. So it indicates that that these funds are being used widely across the state to really do a good job of putting in hopefully adequate public library spaces for all the different kinds of services that public libraries offer right now. The first project, and these 11 projects, if you look at them carefully, really represent several different kinds of approaches to improving library service in these communities. The Sarah Hightower Regional Library, for instance, in the Rockmart Library, is an adaptive reuse of a technical building on a high school campus that was turned over to the city, and this is going to provide a 20,000 square foot adaptive reuse of that building to provide a modern public library for the city of Rockmart in Polk County. This is going to be an anchor in a new municipal complex that will include police, a municipal court, and city government. So the library will be very central to the community in Polk County. So that is really the number one project on our list, and as we move forward, we're certainly pleased with that one. And there is detailed information about that project in there. The next one is the DeKalb County Public Library, which is really a large, what they're calling a city annex building. This is going to allow for the creation of a building that's off-site of their main library in downtown Decatur, but it's going to free up 10,000 very precious square feet in downtown Decatur for more direct public use. Their administrative facilities, their technology facilities, as well as their technology infrastructure is going to be going into this new building that will again allow more public space in their facility. All of Georgia's libraries have a particular interest, heightened interest in this project, because this facility will house the LATA technology infrastructure for the statewide network, or at least the North Georgia portion of the statewide network. So all of the communication services that serve over 5 million Georgians will go through this building. So it's being designed to accommodate the equipment, to provide 24/7 high security, and allow for the integrity of the maintenance of the integrity of that network at that key location. So this is an important project not only for DeKalb County and Decatur, but also for the state of Georgia. So that's why we're recommending this one so highly to you. The Sequoia Regional Library is number 3 on the list, and this is a renovation and in some ways an expansion of their current main library at the R.T. Jones Memorial Library in Cherokee County. This one will permit increased patron space, increased areas for shelving, increased areas for seating, and also increased areas for technology. This is a theme that runs through all of these projects, is really to provide an enhanced level of technology within the buildings so that they can accommodate all of the new the laptops and the other kinds of equipment that are both being provided by the library or are being brought in by patrons. So many of these buildings, as you see, will be we'll talk about enhanced wiring and enhanced wireless capabilities, and certainly enhanced electrical. Buildings built in the 70s, 80s, and 90s just were not capable of anticipating the tremendous use of technology in public libraries. So many of these projects are the key. One of the key elements of these projects is to enhance those programs. The Sequoia Library actually is the building. The R.T. Jones Library actually is a large square donut, and there's a courtyard space in the middle. So they're really going to be using this funding to take in that courtyard space and rehabilitate the areas around it so that they can make that courtyard much more effectively usable as public space. Now, the Athens Regional Library is number 4 on the list, and they're going to be renovating 63,000 square feet of their existing building, which was built quite a few years ago, and they're going to be adding an additional 20,000 square feet. There was a SPLOST election for this building, and this will again provide additional seating, additional space. They have over 2,000 people a day using that, many of whom are University of Georgia students who come to that library for study and research space. And again, this is going to provide significant enhancements to their technology infrastructure to keep up with the demand. So that project is recommended to you. The Three Rivers Regional Library System is number 5 on the list, and this is a Camden County St. Mary's Public Library. And again, this is a renovation and expansion. They're taking their 7,000 square foot library, renovating it, but also adding 7,500 square feet for about a 15,000 square foot library. More growth in population in that area, more demand, a lot more use of their libraries requires those additional spaces. Let me see if we can catch up with you.
That was the future coming. I had no way to do it.
Excuse me. Okay, now, do we know how to get the... pardon? Sure, we'll put it on. Well, in any event, the next one is the Uncle Remus Regional Library, the library in Morgan County. And one more time, this is a renovation. Let's see. There's the map. I'll quickly go through this. I won't repeat everything, but there's the map showing the spread of projects. These are some of the examples of our recent project, and this one in particular in Gwinnett County, which is under construction right now, will be a LEED certified building. That's important for energy and environmental design, meeting energy and environmental design standards, and those are the kind of standards that we want to try to build and encourage as many libraries as possible to achieve. So this, again, will address environmental and energy efficiency issues. But those are some of the projects that, again, you have supported and voted on the funding.
Mr. Commissioner, just real quickly go back to the beginning so they can see this slide real quickly.
Okay.
I apologize for the technical difficulties.
Okay. Well,
that's a usual excuse.
All right. This is the slide of where those projects have been funded in past years. So we have these several projects that are in design or that are under construction at this point. These two, I think, are opening later this year in Jasper County and in the Hampton Public Library in Forsyth County. Again, those are ones you approved in previous years, and they're now coming to fruition. This one is the Sprout Springs Library in Hall County, which opened this year, which is a marvelous building in the Hall County area. This is the map showing where the proposed 11 construction projects are, and you can see that they're scattered from pretty far north to as far south as you can get in Georgia to support library service in those particular areas. This really repeats the information that I was sharing with you regarding these first projects. This is the Rock Mart Public Library, and shows the floor plan as it currently exists. Many of these are works in progress, of course. The DeKalb County Library Central Annex, the Sequoia Library, the R.T. Jones Memorial Library, showing that project. This is an artist rendering of the Athens Regional Library. This is about a $10 million project, so the local community has an awful lot of interest and awful lot of support in this particular project. The Three Rivers Regional Library System, again in Camden County, St. Mary's. This is a relatively small library that was built in 1987. It's way too small now, so they're actually adding to doubling the size of that project. Uncle Remus Regional Library in Morgan County. In Madison, it was constructed in 1974, even before our good friend Steve Schaefer was director over there, so it predates him. And again, they are in need of rehabilitating and expanding that building to accommodate the increasing use. This library happens to be on a campus near several of the public schools, and so there's a lot of student use of those of that facility, almost as their school library in that area. This is number 7, and this is the Satilla Regional Library, the Jeff Davis Public Library in Jeff Davis County. They presently have a 3,200 square foot building constructed in 1977. It's way too small. It has some serious construction and envelope issues. The plan is to replace it with a 9,000 square foot library. They received a bequest a year or so ago that has some time sensitive strings attached to it, and so we have been trying to work with that local community to fast track that project and to bring it along. It'll provide new technology and certainly expanded space for programs and services that a rural community like this would certainly expect and enjoy and use. The Thomas County Public Library, one more time, this is a building that was built in '93, very, very heavily used. They're going to renovate 23,000 square feet and add 4,000 square feet, again, to bring it up to modern standards with shelving, public spaces. The director told me that they have a meeting room that accommodates 80, yet when they have a children's program in the community, there may be 300 there, so they need additional program space for the kinds of programs that public libraries put on. That's number 8 on the list. Now, the first 7 were the ones that were recommended up through the Board of Regents process. These last 5, including this one, was on our lower tier of projects and has been picked up by the governor in recommending that one forward. But this would be a tremendous boon to Thomas County to have this library, which is approaching 20 years old now, to be updated and rehabilitated and added to. Clayton County Library, which several of your colleagues have spoken about, is at the Forest Park branch of the Clayton County Library. This is a very small landlocked library that was built in 1967 and is in great need of replacement. The local community has a SPLOST that will provide about $2.5 million. They're asking for $2 million in state construction money and state matching money. This will add a great deal to the Forest Park area of that county and provide a new 16,000 square foot modern library in that community. So we would recommend that one also. The Sequoia Regional Library also has this project, which has been recommended by the governor's office and OPB. This would provide. This is in the early planning stages. I'm not going to pretend that this one is shovel ready quite at this point, but certainly will be shovel ready by the time that the process is completed and our good friends at the GSFIC are able to sell the bonds. But this would provide a new construction of 20,000 square feet in an area of Cherokee County that really presently does not have a library. It's designed to serve approximately 47,000 residents in that area, and would again be a new modern library with a lot of technology resources in it. Lastly, we have number 11 on the list, which is within the Uncle Remus Regional Library System. This is the O'Kelly Memorial Library in Loganville, Walton County. They are planning for a 16,600 square foot library. Again, this one is picked up and recommended. I will have to tell you that it is also in the early planning stages. There is currently new discussion going on. There's great support for this project within the community, and certainly by community leaders. There is ongoing planning with the new local officials now about the perhaps adaptive reuse of one of the public buildings in the community, rather than starting from scratch with a brand new building. There may be some adaptive reuse that is being discussed at this point. So again, that project would be ready to go when the funding and support were made available to it. So, Mr. Chairman, those are the 11 projects. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have of us in this process. And I do appreciate the time you're spending on looking at these programs and projects.
Thank you, Dr. Beach. I've got several questions, and we'll try to move quickly because we're running way behind time. But Chairman Hembry, I recall we putting, at least in this subcommittee, putting a project on in the list that might have not been on the priority list 2-3 years ago. And finally, last year we got it in, the governor signed it into law, and the library's not even built, nor is a bond sold. Could you give us an update on Chairman Hembry's location? What's the name of the library, Mr. Chairman?
It was actually last year. It was the Fair Play Library.
The Fair Play Library. I honestly do not have the details on where that process is at this point. Again, sometimes there's a long lead time in doing your planning to get it ready. Working with GFSIC, funds are not expended until the work is actually done, either by the architect or by the contractor. So funding is provided to those libraries as a reimbursement. So a lot of planning and a lot of work has to go on as far as that was concerned. I do not have the latest detail on exactly where we are at this project.
But other libraries have been started and finished in quicker time than this one that has gone nowhere.
Yes. In some cases, the planning work is a lot further along when those projects are added to the list. And that's really why it's often important to adhere to the list, because those have already had their homework done at the local level before they even get to us. In some cases, we do pick those projects up, which are extremely worthwhile, but do have to go back and do a lot more homework in order to get them ready to go out for bid and then, of course, start construction. I have two of my colleagues with me, Julie Walker, whom you know, sir, as well as Nate Rawl, who is our facilities construction manager on our staff. And he works very closely with these individual libraries and individual planners at the local level.
Can you tell us?
Nate, can you share with us?
We can't hear you, sir.
Come up.
Dr. Beach, if you could, I'm going to have Chairman Hembry to talk with his local library to see the work that has been done and what the problems are, if y'all would work closely with him, because this thing has clearly been a priority for 3 years, and now it doesn't look like it's moving anywhere. But
Yes, sir. The Fair Play Library, we are currently in design on that library. I have been working with the library director in that district or in that system, and we are in design, and I anticipate construction somewhere towards the end of the fall.
What if they haven't sold the bonds, though?
What if they haven't sold the bonds? They have local funding that will allow them to move the project to a certain point. At that point, we will schedule the bonds. I think those bonds are scheduled to sell. That's probably part of that $478 million that they were talking about. So once those are sold, they can move on into construction. But they do have local funding that will allow them to move forward at this point.
Any anticipation on completion date?
If we can start that project construction, let's say August time frame, I'd probably say about 10 months after that.
Because see, I think the frustration is it was vetoed. It was like you said, it was in the mix several years ago, and then it was vetoed by the governor. So I'm a little surprised that it's still around, and you're still trying to figure out when to put it in the package, and maybe it's a priority, maybe it's not. When local folks do put the effort up, you'd think you would come through and follow through with them, right?
Well, we are following through, but sometimes when those projects are vetoed,
so
all work sort of stops, and,
right.
and nobody knows. The local community is hesitant to go forward with their planning, to go forward with their architectural work, not knowing if they're then going to get some state support for those projects. So it's a fits and starts kinds of stop and start kind of situation sometimes when the local community isn't ready to come forward because they don't quite know what the state's going to do, and it's unfortunate, but we're trying to work as closely as possible with them, and we can give you a lot more give you as much detail as there is on that project. But I do sympathize with your frustration, because it's a hard.
Well, I guess the frustration is, you mentioned priorities, and obviously I think that you certainly should have a list, but we also have priorities in our lives too.
I fully agree.
So our priorities may be different than yours.
Right.
And as elected officials, we have a little more at stake as far as activities. So I feel like in some ways you've forgotten that once we leave here, you just forget that we have these priorities as well. So
I can assure you we have not forgotten about that project, but we can only move as fast as the local community is willing to move.
And you can also only move as fast as the bond is sold, too,
absolutely.
Right?
And we're trying to, but we can't come to GFSIC and say, sell the bonds when all the prior work that they want hasn't already been done. So it's very much a multi-party dance that we have to do in order to move this down the road, if I can mix metaphors. But it takes some finesse to
make things
you're dancing
happen
right
now,
right
and
time.
I think the dance.
I'm dancing right now.
You're dancing
too,
right
I
now.
assure you.
And my encouragement would that you would dance forward with these projects, because we put these in, and we expect them to get done.
We
don't need to wait 3 or 4 or
can.
5 years for them to be accomplished.
Certainly. Thank you.
I want to follow up with that too, please, sir. Once again, this is our stimulus package.
Yes.
We put people to work building these, and then going forward, hopefully there's enough funds to turn the lights on.
Right.
But if we've got projects, as the commissioner said a while ago, 2007 and not built, what do we need to do what do you need to do to make these projects move forward? Because I know you want them. You're not trying to stop them. But what do you need to do to move these things forward, like Chairman Hembry here?
We want to take your money and build the best libraries we can with it.
What are we going to do then?
But in some, very honestly, sometimes it is the local communities aren't as ready as they perhaps thought, or maybe there's a new commissioner or a new council member or a new mayor who has another idea about this.
Well,
And
then
so
maybe what we
some
should
of
do-
those, and so we have to wait for them to come forward and to do their part in order for us to be able to move. But
I've
we're
got
not the ones oftentimes slowing it down.
Dr. Beach, what you just said is so true. Maybe perhaps before we even move forward with the project henceforth, is that we need a resolution from the cities and the counties so somebody can't change their mind going forward.
We are requiring those as best we can.
No, maybe we should require you
to get
that's just as a suggestion. We require you, before we even consider this thing, that we have a resolution from the cities and the counties that are funding this SPLOST, that we don't want to dance anymore if you want to do it. And the second thing, another question I want to ask you is all of these projects, when you ask to put them on the priority list, are you following the SPLOST dollars that are coming in? In other words, if we're going to fund it, are there SPLOST dollars coming in at the rate and the speed that they need to in order to complete the project on time? If not, we need to be careful on that too, because I'm hearing that some of the SPLOST dollars are not coming in at the rate that's necessary, and they don't want to tell us this because they don't want to lose this project. Oh, we'll find the money, but it's happening. Now, I had two statements there. One is that going forward, maybe this year, we need a statement from everybody going forward. We got plenty of time for cities and counties to say, we'll sign a resolution saying no more games played. Because I'm hearing this, and then you confirmed what I've been hearing. And Chairman Hembry over here is wondering, after 3 years of vetoes and bonds not being sold, that now we're finding out that some commissioner decides he got up on the wrong side of the bed and he wants to change his mind on something. Well, we can't change our mind. Once we do it, it's in the law now.
Yeah.
And now we're looking at the next round of bonds, and we haven't sold the last round. Your comments?
I think we could heighten the level of certification that the local communities bring forward. Sometimes it's a matter of the regional libraries and cooperating with the local member counties. There's a lot of political levels that take place, and sometimes it just takes time, and sometimes again, as I mentioned on a couple of these projects, they've really had second thoughts about what their initial plan was, and the fact that it was a concept at that point. Now the governor is, wonderfully coming forward and recommending these projects. Now we have to spend. Now we are going to be spending more time with those projects to bring them forward and bring them up to speed.
Dr. Beach, there's not a member on this committee that doesn't love libraries. We appreciate what you're doing. We sense your frustration there. But I'm about to think, and I'm going to let the members help us decide later about requiring a city or county to have a resolution that they're not going to change their mind or hold you up or whatever.
That is entirely not reasonable. I mean, that is entirely reasonable.
Is that?
Thank you. There's a double negative in there someplace. It is a very reasonable thing to ask and require. What, again, is one of the circumstances of this whole process is that so many of these libraries have an idea, they get on the list knowing that it's going to be 4 or 5 years before they sort of float to the top and are eligible for funding, that so many things can change within a local community. And plans that looked solid 4 or 5 years ago, have morphed and changed a little bit, and certainly current economic conditions can have an impact on what these communities are capable of doing. So we have to try to be pretty flexible with these communities in being able to work with them. But I guarantee you, we're trying to move these projects along as quickly as we can, and I also guarantee you that not a dime is spent without some work having taken place, either architecturally or construction-wise, before any of that money is drawn down from GFSIC. So, but I appreciate and I share, and I appreciate your sharing your frustrations with us, because these are oftentimes
I'm
difficult
merely
to
being
move forward, even if they are pretty small in the scheme of
Dr. Beach, I'm
university
merely
system.
being a messenger, because I'm hearing this from a lot of members that they love the libraries. It's a community type thing where
Yes.
everybody's participating. They're working to pass a SPLOS, and they're excited about it. And then 2 years comes along, 3 years comes along, and one gets vetoed. In Chairman Hembry's case, I'm rehashing the same story over and over and over, but we're going to have to, because you're frustrated and we're frustrated that now in economic times. And reason all of you in the audience here, this is very, very important what we're doing, because we're having to cut in a lot of areas, and these capital projects may be our saving grace in the communities in which they're going. So we're for the first time, we're asking libraries where they are to give us a little bit more information, because we pass these things, we go home, we find out they're not done.
Yeah.
And so, anyways, and as we wait, technology changes daily.
Yes.
And so one library is doing this year, and but the library of the future is what I've talked with you about as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
We'll move forward. I'm going to go with Secretary Chokas, because he was first.
Thank you.
Time out. Everybody having fun? Anybody bored? Raise your hand if you're bored. Good. Secretary Chokas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Veach, this question may be directed more towards Mr. Wall. I was going through the cost of the project, total project cost, and then the total square footage, and was just doing the math, and those numbers ranged from $200 a square foot to $900 a square foot. And I sure would like to get some insight and comments on that.
Some of them, what you're looking at is in some cases the cost of rehabilitating existing square feet. So you can't quite look at a project and say, okay, he's only adding 3,500 square feet and it's going to cost $2 million. That just seems way out of proportion. But what they have done is to plan the cost of rehabilitation. In some cases, that includes the cost of completely changing out their entire HVAC system. And those can look like they raise the cost. So I would really, we can give you a lot more detail about what any particular project is about, but I would really caution you against trying to make comparisons like that, because the cost will vary in, for instance, the cost of rehabilitating the Athens Regional Library because of its complexity, because of the size of the building, is going to be considerably different than perhaps a small standalone 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 square foot library. But we monitor those, and we look very carefully at what their budget proposals are.
Okay, Dr. Veach, let me ask you, if you would, number 6, the Uncle Remus Regional Library. If you could get with me later or get me some information, that was the most expensive cost of construction or renovation.
Okay.
If you could just get with me on that one, I'd appreciate it.
Okay.
Thank you.
And that may be a situation where that entire building is going to undergo a lot of rehab, and we'll get you the detail.
Thank you.
Dr. Beach, I'm probably going to have 2 or 3 people to talk with you on this very subject, and maybe as a subcommittee of a subcommittee to have 2 or 3 people to assign to discuss the discrepancy in the square foot cost,
Sure.
as well as go by one the libraries. And the other one is we had 2 or 3 members that came forward, legislative members that came forward that said, why is our library not in there?
Yes.
Or why is our project not in there? So we need them. We'll talk that later, sir.
Okay. We may have several people from several representatives of several of these libraries. I see Darrell Wiley from the DeKalb County Library, and certainly any in-depth, detailed questions people like that can answer, but I appreciate
Thank you.
their
Chairman
their being
Himbert.
here.
Okay, he waves. My good friend, my hero,
Thank you.
Chairman Yates.
I thought we had a pretty good library, Flint River Library in Griffin, but our people, after I see all these pretty buildings here, is our people down there asleep or something?
Well, again, local money you have to be pretty assured that you've got a good share of local money before you come to the state. And I don't know about there are many libraries that have not come forward lately, and I can't specifically answer that, but certainly they would be eligible if they were interested.
Isn't that a pretty good library?
Good libraries, yes.
You talk local money, now you quit preaching going to meddling here.
That's true. That's always my problem is that we do have to talk about local money, and that is meddling, I'm afraid.
Dr. Bates won't finish with this. We're going to see Cisco. And I'm not trying to pick one over another, but I've been to Cisco. If we arrange a meeting where you and some of your pick some from libraries around the state to come visit, to go look at this facility, we're going to get that set up for you.
We would love to come visit because
this is clearly the future.
We get the ideas.
When you go into this place, it's a Georgia company, and we need to buy Georgians too. By the way, I had one other thing in Oconee County, my home. I had breakfast with 3 writers. 3 Georgia writers live in Oconee County. Terry Kay,
yes,
Grady Thrasher, who writes children's books, and Philip Lee Williams. And we were talking about libraries, and they're very concerned about libraries. The traditional libraries that we open books, we go in and grab them and brief through them and so forth. That Kindle, the Kindle technology that you see that's in book form, that if they ever design a Kindle that looks like a book, feels like a book, and you change it, backlight it like your cell phone, that we're not going to need the volumes of books that we need. In addition to that, they said Google is downloading every book known to man and woman.
Well, there's some real copyright issues involving that, and I know that the writers are very concerned about being able to sell copies of their books, whether they're in paper format or whether they're in electronic format.
But what they were saying, sir, is they're afraid for the future of the existing types of libraries that I like to go in there and get a book off the shelf, take it home and read it. That we're moving away from that more toward downloading on a computer or a Kindle or whatever. And they're concerned deeply as a writer about that. And
well, I would say that they should come spend some time at the Athens Public Library or at the Oconee Library, because there are people filling up the parking lots and they're filling up the seats in the libraries, and there are a lot of people in this state that across the country even that have a lot of faith in the institution of a public library as a place where information can be obtained, where reading can be enjoyed. The voters of Fulton County last fall voted $286 million to help improve their libraries. So there are an awful lot of people with confidence in libraries.
How many members have been in the library lately?
Thank you.
And when you go in these libraries, what Dr. Beach is saying is absolutely true. The people in the parking lot is full, and I don't know what I don't know what they're doing because I hadn't been in there long enough. But I concur with what you're saying.
You don't have to ask what they're doing most of the time. They're using libraries for a whole lot of purposes. Looking for reading, but they're also looking for jobs. They're also applying for jobs. They're also trying to improve their lifestyles in one way or the other. I mean, there's a million reasons why people go in and use public libraries, and I think that's why they are so important, because everybody can define their own need and their own use in that library, but we have 40 million uses a year of libraries in Georgia. So there are a lot of people, the death as Mark Twain said, my death is greatly exaggerated. The news of my death is greatly exaggerated. And I think that's the case here. unfortunately, we're losing through the budget reductions that we all have to take. We're losing a lot of purchasing capabilities for buying new books, but I'm sure that Terry Kay and the other writers are still receiving some decent royalties from the sale of their books in our libraries, because they are popular and people do come for that kind of reading also. But libraries are changing daily in how they provide services, in what kind of services they provide, and that's why so many of these projects are needed, because these buildings need to be rehabilitated so that they can plug the equipment in, they can plug the wiring in that is needed
Dr.
to
Beach,
run this.
thank you for coming. We're having no more questions, but I want to encourage you once again to help us help the libraries get these bond projects sold and get the bricks going up, and work through Commissioner Stansel and GSFIC and others. Let's get these things moving.
We have some leverage.
Let us know what we need to do.
Thank you.
Get moving.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And Board of Regents, y'all been waiting for a long time, but we thank you. And anybody needs to get up, that you're free to do it, y'all. Thank you very much for what you do too. We have the Board of Regents capital list. We're pushing 20 minutes to go. We may have to do it again, do part of it now and another part later. Okay. Okay. Everybody, did you hear, Doctor? Glad y'all are here, ma'am. Appreciate what you do in the library system. Great. Chairman Hembry has a question before you start, Ms. Daniels. And by the way, this is Ms. Linda Daniels. She's a associate chancellor. I think I've got you right. Is that close?
Close.
It's close. For the university system, and she's in charge of all of the facilities for the members who didn't know that. Chairman Hembry.
Hey, Ms. Daniels, good
Hi.
to see you. How many program management projects did the Regents enter into last year?
Program management, and I might...
Contracts, I should say.
Contracts, total contracts?
How many program management contracts did the Regents enter into last fiscal year?
Sharon, can you get...
You want to answer that later? Get a little time?
Could we get that number for you?
Yeah. Could you get it to me by tomorrow?
Oh, absolutely.
And I need also to know what the cost of these contracts were.
For program management, Sharon, didn't we do a presentation on as like between 0.5% up to 1.5%?
Could you explain that to the members? Could you explain to the members what a program management contract is? And
Certainly. I have program managers on my staff that are employees, and then in the private sector there are companies who specialize in program management. Typically that's providing an oversight role in the delivery of a construction project. So you have typically the design architect, and you have the contractor or the construction manager, as GSFIC was explaining to you earlier. A program manager provides the oversight. Typically they help with some of the programming of the project and help sort of see the project from soup to nuts. What I have found in 17 years in state government is sometimes funding and the capital program is kind of peaks and valleys of funding, and you can't afford in state government to staff up to the maximum funding level of the capital projects, but you want to get those projects going in a timely fashion. So what we see is the need to, when there's a robust bond sale, sometimes that we need to get some additional oversight for program management to make sure that we do exactly what you were talking about earlier, which is to get the projects up and running and moving, and that somebody's absolutely riding herd over that project and not letting it get bogged down.
in this budget shortfall environment that we're currently in, have there been any efforts maybe to make cuts in the area of program management contracts and these individuals that you say work under you in these capacities?
We're trying to stay in tune with the anticipated funding level. So as we look at a robust bond package, we're trying to make sure that at the in-house staffing level we stay on par, and that if we need to call in additional outside program managers, we can. My colleagues from GSFIC are still here. I think that GSFIC, as they are staffing, I mean, they have certainly sent the message to me that they would prefer that we use less outside program managers and allow them to staff up more to serve that need.
Do you think the private sector is doing a poor job? Do you think that maybe a government employee does a better job at that?
I think competition is a very good thing, and I think the private sector keeps us as public servants on our toes and doing a good job. I can't say that I believe that one is better than the other, but I think that we need to always in state government challenge ourselves to be aware of what's happening in the private sector and to be embracing best practices, and sometimes that's the right thing to do, to outsource.
Do you know how many people you have staffed in those positions right now?
I have 4 program managers working at 35 colleges.
And how long have they been in existence? For a number of years? Are they new employees? Have they been around for a while?
No, I was originally a program manager 17 years ago, and we have had up to 5. We are down right now to 4. But since 1992, when I came to work at the Board of Regents, I believe that 4 program managers were in place, and we went up to as many as 5. But now we're back down to 4.
Do they work on one project at a time?
Oh, no. Within the 35 institutions, we divide the schools up amongst them. We try to divvy up the workload as best we can. So they would have projects at 9 different campuses across the system, one of which would be a research university, one of the regional or larger institutions like West Georgia or Kennesaw, and then we try to divide up the 4-year and the 2 years evenly, again, workload.
So you're going to get me that information tomorrow?
Certainly.
Ms. Daniel, rather than tomorrow, if you could have your person to come when they're ready today in front of the mic and give us a verbal number instead of waiting until tomorrow, if you could. It's probably sure on top of the head. Is that correct?
Yeah, again, it was the cost of these contracts, and how many program management contracts did the Regents enter into last fiscal year, and what was the cost of these contracts?
We did a recent report on this.
Is she prepared to do that now, or could she come do now?
Have you got that number? Okay, we're blackberrying, and we'll get that number.
Okay, well, sometime before we finish, if you could give us a little rundown, a verbal rundown.
Certainly.
Okay. We've got 2 hours, and it's 2:46 now, and I said 1 to 3, and I'm willing to stay here until midnight because this is very, very good information. But the members are probably. I see Chairman Hembry fixing to scoot on us. We got members saying they got a 3 o'clock meeting, but maybe we could. Let's see how we could do another 15 minutes.
Absolutely.
And then we'll come back and elaborate.
Sure. What I've actually got is the overview lists of
Okay,
the
well,
projects.
let me ask you this. Instead of doing the projects today, Chairman Henry, could you stay with us another 5-10 minutes? Instead of going through the projects first, we'll do the projects the next time. And I do apologize for delaying you, but we had some very, very good information today. It's something that we needed from Commissioner Stansel. Maybe perhaps we'll just open this up to questions right now like he had, and maybe ask some of the same questions we asked Dr. Beach and Commissioner Stansel. And I'm going to let Chairman Hembry start this rally.
I have a question for you. In light of what's happening and our obvious concern about these projects in the past that haven't been sold and the bond issues, would you consider maybe we postpone some of your current projects until these other projects are put up front and bonds are sold?
I certainly hope not. I hope that I won't be put in a position of needing to champion that. I would make an educated guess that of that $400 million in unsold bonds, that right around 1/4 of them, 25%, belong to higher education. That's a consistent number that we hear when you look typically at the bond sale packages and what's recommended. So I would submit to you that some of those, the issue may not be that they're not ready, but just there's a certain amount of hit that the Board of Regents needs to take, just like everybody else, and that what's probably about $100 million is ready to go. We're anxious for those bonds to be sold, and we would appreciate everybody pulling together to make that happen, but also to keep the projects on track that we're bringing before you now.
But I guess I'm just, as a question for you to use your wisdom and insight, shouldn't there be some kind of system in place that perhaps we could have that we wouldn't go forward with future bond sales until we had accomplished what we had in the past?
Well, it is my understanding that this remaining amount of bonds we would assume would be sold come June or right around June, and hopefully, if the bond market is really good, if we have a similar situation to what we have right now, that they would go ahead and begin to pick up some of what you're considering right now. I think we're in a situation where we hope that the state of Georgia is going to be nimble and ready to put forward as aggressive a package as possible, because when the selling of the market for bonds is good, I think that the state is very anxious to get out there and get that market when they can. And I hope so, because we certainly have a need for these projects that are in the pipeline. We really do.
I think that's true, but under these economic circumstances and these times, they're very different from what you've experienced in the past. So would it be wise to maybe have a different direction? In the past, it was easy to go out and issue bonds. Am I correct? It seemed to be a pretty easy thing with the AAA bond rating. Is that right?
I think it vacillates, and I think that's the good work that the GSFIC Financing Division does. You want to monitor it for the best. But absolutely, you're totally right. The last 6 months have been unprecedented.
So maybe in the future, with your leadership, perhaps we should have a different plan of action where we look at these things more closely and make decisions based on what's been done in the past to try to get the things going forward. Because I think it gives false hope when you have all of these projects and you talk about how great they are. That's great that you have these, but the reality is you don't know when construction will take place, right?
We have to do some crystal balling. You're absolutely right, and we are not absolutely assured.
So you come to us as a legislative body and say, we really need these things. These are the best things that could happen to our communities, but we don't really know what's going to happen down the road, and so I think it would be wise for us to reevaluate the process so that it could be something that is done in a way so that projects are accomplished. At the same time, we look at the economic conditions, and I'm just talking as a legislator, but I do need to get insight from you because that's your expertise.
I think that what right now, I personally absolutely believe that construction is the economic stimulus that could make a difference in this state. And my hope is that we, at the Board of Regents, can be prepared and nimble and give you the kind of projects that if the rates are good and we're in a position to sell those bonds in a good market, that we can put Georgians back to work across the state, because just like the libraries are all around the state, we can make a big difference with the subcontractors and the vendors all over the state of Georgia if we can get some of this stuff in the pipeline. And with this AAA bond rating, this is an extremely opportune time for Georgia to be taking advantage of that, to have something like that, and to be able to be nimble and get out there and hopefully get a little bit ahead of the curve. Sure would like to do that before the Obama stimulus package kicks in. We'd like our stuff under construction.
Okay. I've got a few questions. 2006, are there any bonds waiting to be sold?
No, sir.
2005, 2004,
No.
2003.
No, we're up to last year with what I believe the exception of about 3 library projects, including that.
2007.
Let me see. Check my notes.
2008.
Yes. What I can tell you we have with Regents is a project that was added in the legislature. We have only sold the design funding for the Animal Rescue Center at Fort Valley. We are on track if there's construction funding available in June, that we would be ready to move that forward expeditiously. As you know, the very appropriate moving forward of the Murphy Library project was a little bit unexpected. We did not have that fully designed when we got the construction money, so we only sold the design money for the the Murphy Library project. We have that. That's underway, and that is remaining to be sold and would be available in June. The library projects are the Fair Play Library. We have an equipment purchase that obviously the equipment was included in the construction package at Kennesaw. And because the construction takes a certain amount of time, we put the equipment into the tail end of that, and so that needs to be sold, and we do believe that it will. You know, we took a gamble, but it'll be sold just in time to open up that library. I mean, that health sciences building at Kennesaw. The School of Dentistry at the Medical College of Georgia is where the bulk of our 25% of the remaining bond sales are. Because of the magnitude of that project and the fact that it's being done through construction management, we can incrementally sell bonds, and so we have sold 10 of those $70 million, and that project is moving forward. But that's where the bulk of the region's money.
Could you describe the word "moving forward"? Is that spade in the ground, or is that just moving forward, moving forward?
That's proceeding with the design, doing site work. It may not be that we're fully ready to pour the foundations yet, but we know we're going to have to grade the site, and so we've probably got some early site packages going on, drilling borings about foundations and that sort of thing. So
continue.
That's what we want to do. We received full funding for a renovation at Clayton State for their health sciences building. We simply asked for the design money because we did not have that fully designed, so we have the remaining construction funds there. Similarly, we asked for the design money for the Henman Technology Building at Georgia Tech. That's under design, and we are still seeking the construction funding for that project. Similarly, the Alpharetta Center, we have full design funding, and we're waiting on the construction funding for that. As long as we sell June to August, we'll have that in time to keep the project on schedule. Similarly, we've sold $1 million of the Tift, Lewis, and Herring renovation funding down at ABAC. Again, by the time we finish that design, we'll be ready for the construction funds. We have sold the design funds, but we're holding on the construction funds for the Gordon Health Sciences building, and that's the same story. It'll be ready to come out of the ground as soon as the next bond sale takes place. The following projects are libraries, including we have the design funding for the Special Collections Library at Georgia, but we have about half $500,000 left in that project that we haven't sold the bonds for. And the other library projects are the Grantville Public Library in Coweta County, the Forsyth County Public Library, and the Sonoya Coweta County Library.
Ms. Daniels, just being the messenger once again, you hear people lean on you and ask you to ask questions, and some of these projects, we wonder why they move and why they don't move. And listening to GSFIC's comments a while ago, there are 5 elected: the governor, the lieutenant governor, speaker of the House, attorney general, commissioner of agriculture, and appointed a director, treasurer, and state auditor. And then there's a couple that says the buck stopped at the Board of Regents, even though there's the politics side, the elected side wants to move a project. And a couple of them has come straight to Ms. Daniels, where you're the one where the buck stopped, and it didn't move because of your decision not to move it in some cases. And what happens when are you getting political pressure to make the decision to stop a project, or is it within your realm of power to stop a project that you see that's not ready to move, or because you don't want it to move because of various and sundry reasons? I'm going back to Chairman Hember's library. It's one, and a couple others that I'm hearing that because you didn't want to move it, they didn't move. Is there any truth to that?
I don't think that there's any project that I have personally tried to stonewall at all. And in general, what I'm mostly trying to do, what I'm making my best effort at doing, is to say, is the project ready or not? How far can we take it? How much bang for the buck can we get? If Board of Regents is only going to get 25% of whatever amount of bonds are sold, how can we get the most projects and the most appropriate projects as moving forward as quickly as possible? Occasionally there are some things that I might know about. Something got tied up in a land acquisition, or we know there's some sort of easement on the property that we're working vigilantly with the Attorney General to get worked out, but we don't see that happening imminently. And given that I'm going to have to take my hit in some of that prioritization, those are the things that I try to move to the bottom of the list. I hope that it is always that I'm not letting any personal bias or anything other than professional judgment of a technical nature drive those decisions.
Have you at any time ever been approached by one of these five, the governor, the lieutenant governor, the speaker of the House, attorney general, commissioner of agriculture, and or their agent or whoever, to convince you to hold it up because of political?
I have not.
Talk about projects that have been laying in wait for several years or 2 years or whatever. You're talking about design money. Design 3 years ago is now obsolete. We've already paid for these designs. The architect says I can't stamp it anymore because things have changed without another $50,000 in fees or whatever to move it forward, to put my stamp on it. I think you know that drill. How many of those have we had in the last 2 years that the project just simply don't move because of political lack of expediency, or we're just sitting, overstaffed, underworked, whatever the reasons are? There's so many projects here that aren't moving. And what we're trying to do is, I think I'm speaking on behalf of a lot of the committee members, we got an economy, we got money that we can borrow to move these projects along in the various communities all across Georgia and the campuses, and we're not doing it. What do we have to? And I know that the bond market is getting saturated at some points, and I understand part of that from the early discussion. But in the libraries, we just said, what can we do to help y'all move it forward? It seems like it's a roadblock after a roadblock after a roadblock, and inconsistent with the will of the legislature, because the bills have been signed into law and they linger and linger and linger and linger.
Well, it's very apparent, and I can certainly understand your frustration. I think maybe I haven't done a good enough job in listing these projects. When I say they're in design, I don't necessarily mean the design has been complete and now they're just sitting there waiting for construction. We really have worked hard. We try very, very hard to try to get enough design money or even early site package money to make our best guess. We have to sometimes crystal ball. We don't know when the next bond sale is definitively going to be, but we make our best projection and try to say, what can we do to get these projects as shovel ready as possible? And we work very, very hard to do that. We're not always perfect, but I think we have a fairly decent track record. And one of the just reality factors is the legislative cycle is what the legislative cycle is, and so sometimes you have to look at the construction funds can't be sold until next year, and you got to look at the size of the project. When can you put it under design? Because you're right, you want it to be ready for bidding, or the equivalent of letting your GMP, your construction management contract, as simultaneously as possible with the design. So you do have a situation where it's very, very active management. You can't just click this thing into go and stop paying attention. We have campuses with some facility staff. The larger the campus, the more likelihood that they might have architects or engineers. They are hugely important in complementing the modest number of program management staff that we have, to trying to say, okay, we're monitoring the situation. This bond sale didn't happen. When is the next one? And what's our best guess for keeping this project on track? Is there any institution funds or was there any private match that can be put in to complement the state funding to keep it moving? And I really do have to compliment partnership that we've developed with GSFIC and how hard the campuses and my own staff work to do the best we can with the system. And I think everyone would be open to looking at new ways, as Chairman Hembry has stated, if there are better ways of doing this. I think we'd be crazy not to.
Ms. Daniels, Chairman Henry has a question. We're going to wrap this up because the members have to go to the committee. But is this an opportunity with hundreds of millions of dollars on the line that we could stimulate our economy with projects that we needed yesterday, last year, 2 years ago? Is this a situation where we as a legislature need to budget money for outside project managers to help you through this process to get these things moving? Is this an opportunity that we must, from a short-term basis, make for the first, maybe a one-year line item, to hire additional people that understand the private sector and the market and the building construction and the like, to bring outside professionals in to help Board of Regents move this thing along?
Well, we certainly have the experience back in the early 90s when Zell Miller championed the Georgia Rebound program, and something very similar to that was done. I think our partners at GSFIC are very much looking at project delivery and project delivery methods, and
would you follow up with that on the rebound? I'm not familiar with it, but it sounds like something that we probably need to do because we're getting further and further behind. And maybe the bond markets won't absorb all we're trying to do, but at least we'll help you get. It sounds like you're frustrated too.
Well, we're absolutely doing the best we can. The concept of this strong bond package that this legislature is looking at, and the potential of a complementary federal package, I think we all need to look at it as an unprecedented opportunity and to do whatever is necessary to take advantage of that.
Okay, thank you. Chairman Hembry, one last comment, or two waves. Ms. Daniels, if we're in session Monday or Tuesday next week, we'd like to have you back to go through the project one by one, and I'm going to have 2 or 3 people after that to meet with you, and one by one in a little subcommittee of a subcommittee to go one by one on these. But thank you very much for your patience and what you do. And all of you here today, thank you for your patience. And we got one member here. Oh, you want to talk about a thing, or is this your committee? Oh, meeting adjourned.